All right, I believe we're live, so we can go ahead and get started today. Today is April 29th. The time is 10:03 in the morning, so this is the time and place for a regulatory workshop to discuss consumption lounges. My name is Tyler Klimas, the Executive Director. To my right is Michael Miles, Deputy Director of the Cannabis Compliance Board. I'd like to note that we're joined by Board Member Jerry Merritt, Chair of the Cannabis Compliance Board, Justice Michael Douglas, and I believe Member Nylander is either on or will be calling in shortly. So we appreciate the members' support today. Similar to the last few workshops, we will start with public comment and then we'll go through the proposed changes. This is the third draft, as you know, so we're really going to focus simply on the minor changes that have happened since the last draft. And to that end, we will take both agenda item 2 and agenda item 3. So that is the application regulations and then the operation regulations in their entirety before opening up to public comment. So a little bit different than the last couple times. So we'll go through Reg 1 and Reg 5 for agenda item number 2, open it up for public comments specifically on those two. And then for agenda item 3, Reg 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 15. And then we'll open it up for public comment specifically on those regulations. Then we will end, as we normally do, with a general public comment period. So a number of different opportunities for you to provide your feedback. Also, we've received quite a few comments online and submitted through our email. So those that we received yesterday or up till yesterday are posted online. Those we received after our cutoff date, and today and throughout the day, we will post online following the meeting. Obviously, any comments we received after today, as they pertain to lounges, will also post as we always have. So, with that, Chair, unless you had anything to add, we can get started here. No, I don't think so. So great. We'll start then with agenda item number 1. This is general public comment. We will start in Carson City today. Do we have any members of the public wishing to provide comment in Carson City?
There's no public comment in Carson City.
Great. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to provide general public comment today? Great. Please come up and state your name for the record.
Good morning, esteemed board members. My name is Brianna Padilla for the record, and thank you for your time today. I would like to acknowledge in my statement today the CCB and its employees and our community advocates, as well as industry stakeholders and professionals who have all come together during this process of building these regulations. As we review this final set of proposed regs and dig into addressing the proposed NCCR changes, I'd like to take the opportunity to highlight the fact that our regulators, community, and industry have been coming together in 15 workshops related to lounge regulations since 2021. The promulgation of these laws has been a painstaking process that has required the collective intellect, energy, and commitment of our industry, regulators, and community. By the time these regs are finalized, we will not be the first market with a cannabis consumption lounge model, but we will undoubtedly be one of the best. While no law is ever completely perfect, by following the voices of our constituents and listening to the insight of Nevada's community members, industry stakeholders, and of course our regulators, I'm fully confident that the foundation we are building for cannabis lounges is a solid one that will drive community participation and industry growth. I'm particularly heartened by the thoughtful conversations being had around the owners of independent lounges, particularly as they relate to our equity applicants. It is clearly a priority for the CCB, the Chamber of Cannabis, and our industry to create a regulatory environment where those who are the most harmed by the war on drugs in our own communities are those reaping the immediate benefits of recreational and medical legalization. I look forward to continuing this work with my colleagues in the CCB and our community. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to provide general public comment?
Good morning. Aisha Goins with Black Joy Consulting, representing CEIC Nevada. I appreciate all the efforts that the board and staff has done to put these regulations together. I am still dismayed and disheartened that there is no way to centralize that these applicants only come from Nevada, the social equity applicant specific. I was looking to the regulations, hoping that there was a possibility to at least hold those applicants accountable to being Nevada residents, and it still didn't reflect that. So I just wanted to go on the record saying I grieve for my community that this will be an open application process nationwide. And I hope that this is resolved sooner than later in the next application process.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to provide general public comment?
Hi, good morning. My name is Brendan Bloom. I'm the Vice President of Experiences for Green Thumb Industries. I've been working with Green Thumb for 6 years. Recently just opened our first consumption lounge in Illinois, the first legally compliant consumption lounge east of the Mississippi. I'm here with one of my coworkers, Sarah Stewart, who opened the first lounge in West Hollywood. So we look forward to making comments and providing some of our experiences to help draft these regulations for very friendly for business, consumers, and patients. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to provide public comment? Okay, great. And before we move on to agenda item number 2, I will note for the record that member Durrett has joined us electronically as well. So, all right. So with that, I will turn it over to Deputy Director Michael Miles, who'll do most of the presenting today. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning again. My name is Michael Miles. I'm the Deputy Director of the Cannabis Compliance Board. We'll go through the proposed updates to the changes to the regulations which govern the licensing process. Again, we will open the forum for public comment after a brief description of all the changes. After the public comment, if there are any questions by the board members, the CCB staff is here to respond to those questions. Start off with Regulation 1, the definitions. Several definitions have been removed as they are no longer pertinent on the new application process, and all owners, officers, and board members need to be identified and background checked. Also, lounge licenses that are connected to retail dispensaries have been removed from the prospective license status. Again, the prospective license status with this is if you filled out an application, you've met those minimum scoring requirements, and you were drawn in the random number generator, you're going to be granted the status of a prospective license. Conditional license, you'll be granted that status once those ones that have been selected for a prospective have gone through the suitability analysis and have been granted the conditional status. And then a final license after that is once you've met all the local requirements and all state local requirements, you'll be granted a final status. Final license status. We've decided that the retail will no longer be a part of the prospective. You still have to fill out the application. You still have to meet the minimum scoring requirements on the application to move forward. But instead of obviously going to the drawing, you'll go directly to the suitability analysis. In the Reg 5, this again covers the new application process for licensing of the consumption lounges. NCCR 5.020 again was a housekeeping update regarding the posting of the new application period. NCCR 5.040 is the new application reg. As I'm sure everybody knows, this reg was becoming extremely unwieldy and very large, so we broke it up into 3 different separate, actually ended up being 4 different separate regs. Again, the 5.040 just covers the application process itself. The only major change was adding the required ACH payment process to the application. Again, we've noted we received a few comments about that, and we'll take that into consideration. We have received some questions on the 1,500 foot rule from a gaming establishment, and outside of the grandfathered retail dispensaries, a new lounge cannot be built within 1,500 feet. So if you have a dispensary that was just outside the 1,500 foot, you can't build within the 1,500 foot. If you're grandfathered, then you can build within the 1,500 foot. Pretty straightforward. We had another concern on the 5% rule regarding ownership. But again, we have the 5% rule in place because of publicly traded companies. If we were to check every individual owner, that means we would lock publicly traded companies out of this process altogether. Again, we also had a comment. The general rule has always been that establishment must become operational within 12 months of receiving a final license. And again, that's the way it's been since the beginning. However, there is a procedure to request an extension if you can't get it built within 12 months. And another comment I received is nothing prevents cultivation or production facility from applying for a consumption lounge license. Nothing. Right. NCCR 5.045 is the prospective and conditional license section. We've updated this section on when the random numbers selector will be required. Another change is that the applicant's diversity plan will no longer be confidential once the conditional license status has been granted, meaning the applicant has passed the suitability analysis. And once you pass the suitability analysis, again, your diversity plan will no longer be considered confidential. NCCR 5.050 is an update as to what is required to be granted a final license. Again, mostly housekeeping. NCCR 5.053 has been added to cover a petition for reevaluation of suitability by the board, assuming that the applicant was not found suitable. So again, if you weren't found suitable during the conditional aspect, you can petition the board for reevaluation of that suitability. The procedures are found within 5.053. NCR 5.055 is the social equity requirement. It has been updated to state that all social equity applications only have to pay the $2,500 application fee. Initially we had it set up where if your family was the one that was affected, then it was 50% off. And if you were directly affected, then it was 75% off. We just changed it all so it's the full 75% off for everyone. NCCR 5.060 was updated to make it clear what happens when a retail dispensary applies for a consumption lounge. NCCR 5.065 was updated the requirements to reduce the license renewal fees for consumption lounge licenses pursuant to AB 341. Again, this is a procedure where you can request a reduction in licensing fees. NCCR 5.085, it has been updated with a request for an extension to the 12-month period, which I spoke about earlier, where a licensee must obtain final license has to be submitted. So again, you find you can't get it operational within 12 months, you can request an extension to that 12-month period. And if you have good cause, likely will be granted. NCCR 5.110 is housekeeping updates to the new regulation concerning the transferability of consumption lounge licenses. Pursuant to AB 341, licenses can't transfer a lounge license until after the lounge has been open and running for 2 years. This allows the transfer of up to 49% of shares to raise capital. It also discusses what happens if a licensee passes or is incapacitated. Right, actually, we'll start with the board. Does any member of the board have any questions as to these updates?
I member for the record. I have a couple questions, Deputy Director.
Absolutely.
One, for extenuating circumstances, it was brought up at the last hearing that maybe we should define that. Has anybody submitted a potential definition? And if not, I'd be happy to.
No, we've not received any definition for extenuating circumstances. And again, I guess we've even discussed this with council. It's really hard to come up with a definition specifically limiting extenuating circumstances because, again, it's supposed to be for extenuating circumstances. But
yeah,
we're
that's
definitely
true.
open to any definition.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe it could just be a limitation on what you can't do, what is not extenuating circumstances. But you're right.
Sounds
Maybe
good.
I'll look at it and come to the same conclusion. The other question is, I had asked you about this, but I think I wasn't clear about what I was referencing. I had commented it at the last couple of workshops that I don't think that we should be setting up the application process for other licenses at this time. Has that been changed?
And I'm sorry, yeah, I should have mentioned that. It has been set up, so this is just for cannabis consumption lounges.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Okay, thank you very much.
No, thank you. I should have mentioned that. Any other board members?
I have one comment, distance requirements in grandfathered facilities. If I heard you correct, you were wanting to the grandfathered facilities could build. I would not agree with that unless they stayed within their original footprint. That's the way it's been interpreted for gaming. Not to allow them to expand, but if their facility is within the original footprint, then the grandfather applies.
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought that's what I made.
No, that's what you meant.
Yeah,
That's not what was stated. You just said,
Absolutely. That is absolutely what we meant.
okay.
Any other comments from board members? Right now we'll open up to public comment. Do you have any public comment as to the Reg 1, Reg 5 of the application regs?
Good morning, Amanda Connor for the record, with the law firm of Connor and Connor. I am here commenting on as an attorney that represents several cannabis establishments, wanting some clarification or some suggested language cleanup in these regulations. Much like last time, I apologize. I did not submit my comments in writing. This time I got to bed a little earlier, but it was 1 p.m. last night, or 1 a.m. So I have, though, started notes on my computer and we'll get those to you. Specifically with section 5.0401E3 is where I'd like to go to first. 1E3 says currently, once the applicant identifies the local jurisdiction, the applicant is limited to locations within said local jurisdiction pursuant to 678B.500. I would suggest that the first local jurisdiction be changed to address. It is required by statute that an address be selected. In 1.051, address is defined to be identifying the local jurisdiction. And in the retail store litigation, there was lots of litigation over the fact that an address was not designated, but merely a local jurisdiction identified. Therefore, to avoid this controversy, I would suggest just using the language as defined in the regulations. For 5.0401G1, it says that for if contacted by the board, the applicant must respond immediately, but that if that is impossible, then no later than 2 business days after contact by the board. My question is, how is impossible defined and who determines that it is impossible? I would suggest instead just rephrasing that if contacted by the board, the applicant must respond no later than 2 business days after contact by the board. And I think the regulation intent is to give 2 business days, so I think we should clean that language up.
Why do we need the delay?
I don't think there should be a delay, and in my opinion, most applicants will want to respond as promptly as possible. But I just think if you put a standard of impossibility and it's not defined and it's not clear who determines that, the problem is it later says that the application can be denied if not timely responding. So what if the board decides, well, your reason was not.
But in the alternative, it allows you a maximum time. So it doesn't just cut you off if you didn't immediately respond.
Correct, if it was impossible. But the problem is who gets to determine what's impossible.
Right.
That would be my suggestion. 5.0451. It is my understanding, pursuant to what Deputy Director Miles said and the title of 5.045, that this is only supposed to apply to cannabis consumption lounge um, types, but in number 1, it talks about in the event the number of licenses for any cannabis establishment type. So clearly that is not limited to lounges. So I would suggest a cleaning of that language. In 5.0452, the same comment, if the applicant has met the minimum scoring guidelines for a cannabis establishment, again, it's my understanding it should be limited to lounges. In 5.0452C, gotta flip a few pages, my apologies. Again, the comment on if an immediate response is not possible, the question is what is the determination of not possible and how is that determined? Lastly, I have a comment with regards to 5.055 and 5.065, and I told Ms. Goins I would be making this comment. So my question is, or my comment is that for people who are not involved in the industry currently, they may not realize all the fees associated with operating a cannabis establishment. And while I understand the reason and I support the reduction in fees for social equity applicants, this only addresses the administration processing fee and the license fee, but there are several other fees that clients or establishments may experience. And so for an example, I pulled some sample time and effort invoices that my clients have recently received to give an idea of other fees that would be faced by cannabis establishments. And I think that for social equity clients, or establishments, there may be a reason to reduce those. So for instance, for an ongoing routine audit that is required every year and ongoing analysis, there was an invoice of $7,326 for 1 month for one establishment. For a routine inspection and ongoing work for a different establishment, their 1 month bill was $18,120. And every establishment has to go through those routine inspections. For a pre-opening inspection, which all establishments are required to do, one such invoice was $3,718. And for menu items, which all approvals are required for cannabis establishments to have all menu items, the approval was $888. Again, I think that these fees aren't contemplated in these regs for social equity, and perhaps reduction in those fees would also be appropriate. Those are my comments on these sections. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, board, staff of the CCB. For me, today is a happy day. I feel like we're on the 1-inch line on these regulations. I appreciate all the good work you all have done. I have a comment on section 5.040. Deputy Director Miles and Chair Douglas, you were addressing this piece in your opening remarks. I do believe that retail cannabis consumption lounge applicants should be completely exempted from all location restrictions, assuming that the lounge establishment for which they are applying is either attached or adjacent to the retail store. I'll call your attention to AB 341, the Cannabis Consumption Lounge Enabling Legislation, Section 10, Sub 2, Sub A. I believe that addresses this issue and clarifies that retail owners who are applying for an attached consumption lounge license are not subject to those distance requirements. I submitted a pretty simple comment Pretty simple comment to change that entire section in the draft regs, and I'd urge you to adopt that language. Thank you.
Have you addressed that concern with any of the local jurisdictions or incorporated cities?
Not yet, since we've been working on it in, everything at the state level will govern what those local jurisdictions can do later on. But I think that a local jurisdiction might have a difficult time enforcing a more strict standard, given that the state law exempts retail locations from those distance
The
requirements.
state law also prescribes that local jurisdictions have final determination within that ambit of location suitability. So, and if I understand what you're saying, that also pertains to schools and other things that come into that distance requirement. So that's what we're trying to stay away from is getting in the way of that situation. But I do understand the concerns.
Yep. Yeah, again, the pertinent section of AB 341 is section 10, for the record. Thank you.
As Chief Douglas said, this, so you wouldn't have a problem if it's adjacent building a consumption lounge within 100 feet of a school.
Well, the issue would be that the sales facility is pre-existing. So if a school moved in, that would mean that a school chose to move within 100 feet when there was already a dispensary there.
No, it depends on what happens. If there was one that was outside, just outside the 300 feet, and your APN number allows you to build closer to within, and you end up being within that 300 feet to the school, you're okay with that?
I'm going to take my personal opinion out of this
Okay.
and just point to the law. Again, my suggestion in these regulations, in order to sufficiently address the law, would be the comment that I submitted on 5.040.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Scott Rutledge for the record with Argentum Partners here on behalf of the Chamber of Cannabis. I just wanted to reiterate some concern around 5.0401 sub A and looking for potential change to the ACH payment component. Number two, on 1E sub E1, an attestation wherein the applicant agrees and understands that the actual location when determined where the cannabis establishment will be conducting businesses meets those setback requirements, and would ask that in that attestation that we actually allow for an exception for retail cannabis establishment licenses, understanding that there will be ultimate decision making with the local authority. If they're asked in applying to the state for this license to sign an attestation that says they meet those requirements, but they're already grandfathered in, then are you asking the attestation identify that they have been grandfathered in based on their retail store location today? Or do we just remove that requirement for a retail store? Because again, they could not do an attestation that would be truthful that says it meets the 1,500, the 1,000, or 300. Mostly where I think we're running into some issues here is potentially going to be with the gaming folks, not necessarily. I mean, I guess it could impact schools and parks, but where I've been hearing some conversation around is some of the gaming related items. And then I just thought it was important to note that there was a floor statement in the Senate by Senator Brooks when the bill was presented for a vote there that specifically discussed protecting the grandfathered retail stores in terms of allowing them to be able to move forward with an attached lounge there. So we'll obviously take this up with local jurisdictions, but that attestation piece here seemed like something maybe we need to address. I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer. So. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Oscar for the record. On behalf of Thrive, Curaleaf, and GTI in this instance, I would just echo the comments of Mr. Anderson and Mr. Rutledge. That is a concern of my clients as well. I would probably make the same arguments. I would also note that it looks like Clark County is looking for you to give them some guidance in their comments to the board. So potentially we can come to some resolution there. But I just echo those comments.
Thanks.
In response to those comments, I just generally, not specifically to you, John. Grandfather provisions are always something that are very interesting to consider. Also, floor statements by legislators that aren't articulated in the vote and in the language of the statute as adopted. They're self-serving quite often as to what they want, but it's not necessarily something that they all agreed upon. That's from hours of looking mystic legislative history on things that don't always reflect the vote at the end. But having said that, grandfather provisions are always interesting, what the really intent was. We have statements by our legislature that they wanted certain requirements as to distances from establishments. They also wanted to preserve the right of existing businesses to continue to operate. The problem comes when we're doing what we're doing now is adding another layer of operation onto a business, and whether or not we're limiting that business to only operate in their existing footprint if they're grandfathered in, or whether we view the new requirements to allow them to operate and push their existing footprint. That's the issue on the law. The gaming stuff is pretty settled about those footprints and extending them. In a lot of courts' view, I can't say what a court will do or not do, but extending that footprint to encroach even further into a distance situation set up. And I think from a public outcry, the public doesn't seem to be as much worried about gaming facilities as the gamers are, but they are worried about their parks and their schools. So that's just a note. And
Yeah,
have
Mr.
to
Chairman,
take
if I
another
may.
look at that.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, a couple things. One, I mean, you kind of got to have to look at this from the John Oscar for the record again, from the practicality point of view too, right? Like if you are already in an existing location, you're using the existing location, right? So there's no more room to put in
Maybe,
potentially, right? Yeah.
because we have some establishments who built out large enough where they can work facility in. I don't know. I just,
And then second, Mr. Chairman, I would never argue the law with you.
you have on occasion.
I have occasionally, yes. But I would say I have some experience in legislative intent and looking at statutes and how they apply. And I had this discussion with a deputy director, and I understand that you would look at the plain language first. That is how statutory construction works. However, after looking at the language of the statute and it's unclear, then you look at the intent of the legislature and those related sources. And in this case, as pointed out by Mr. Rutledge, legislative intent is made when it is talked about on the floor of the legislature.
Mr. Sagawa, I will agree to disagree with you on that point because legislators stand up and they say many things for self-serving needs that don't go with the bill as it's adopted. So we'll disagree on that point, but we do look at it to see if there's enough support to support the position.
I'll leave it at that.
And I would argue that Chief Justice Douglas could easily guess what the court is probably going to rule better than anybody else in this room.
Mr. Chairman, again, Scott Rutledge for the record. One thing I wanted to just add for the record today is that the language for that floor statement was actually provided by the gaming industry. So I thought that was interesting because to the point of self-serving comments, during the process of negotiating this legislation, including the process of having the CCB take on the bulk of the responsibility in terms of the regulations, we didn't want a lot of this stuff to live in statute. And so a lot of the conversations we had with the other stakeholders, including the gaming industry, related to one specific instance of the grandfathering issue. And so the statement that was written and provided to Senator Brooks was actually something that was in conjunction with gaming industry individuals.
Appreciate that comment, but the distinction within what I'm concerned about, and as I said, we'll look at it again. I just can't pull it up. I'm not one of the lucky ones with the photographic memory that can pull all that up. Is whether or not they were dealing with kind of a footprint issue. Understand allowing the business to continue. The rubber hits the road when you talk about expansion. That's the issue I'm concerned about, and the law gets concerned about, of once you exceed your existing footprint. If you go one way outside of those distances, nobody cares. If you go the other way that goes into the area where the distance applies, then people start caring. I don't know if it was exempted out or in, or as it was said, is a language ambiguous enough to allow it. So need to take another look at it.
I appreciate that. Thank you again.
Good morning, Amanda Connor for the record. I am just asking a clarifying question because I think we all may have different understandings in our heads. So can you explain what you mean by existing footprint? Is it within the existing four walls? Is it the APN that has the special use permit? Is it the parking lot or any structure attached? I think that's because I think I hear comments back there and different people are thinking different things for existing footprint.
And I believe the way it's set up right now is from the front door of the establishment to wherever those 1,500 feet, 300 feet, whatever. I think that's how it's set up. So if you were suddenly going to build something else within, like, I think the easiest way to say is if you're at the 1,500 feet, you say you're at 1,550. You have the front door that's 1,550 away from a gaming establishment property, and you were to build a consumption lounge towards the gaming that would make it like 1,450, then you're increasing your footprint, and now it's within distancing requirements, and you wouldn't be allowed to build there.
So just me off the top of my head, you're already within 1,500 feet because we know there's several retail stores that were opened and operational pre the gaming distance separation.
Those are the grandfather people that will be fine.
Okay, so if they're within their existing footprint is what is said. So if they build up and not closer to gaming, that's existing footprint?
They can build closer.
Oh, they can build closer.
Because they're already within the 1,500 foot. They're grandfathered in.
Is that what we're saying?
I think that's what we're saying.
That's where again, you said they're exempted because they're within the 1,500. Well, I don't read it necessarily read it that way. The issue is, if you build up, you're still okay. But
If you build in the back, not getting closer to gaming.
The question within the question is, and you hit it on the head, is how is it measured in that jurisdiction? How do you get to the distance from the park, the school, the gaming establishment?
Right.
If it's from the front door and possibly, and you look at the case law as they look at measurement, that's how you determine whether or not you've expanded within, so you're no longer eligible. The pre-existing facilities, we start with the fact that they can continue to operate, and in some jurisdictions they can operate unless they're non-operational for so many months. But we go to how do you derive the distance to start with? Is it from the front door? And sometimes you have situations where the front door is exactly 1 foot over the line, so it's okay, even though the other part of the facility comes in. That's a case-by-case application of everything that's in. And so you have to look at the various real property decisions about those distance requirements.
Okay.
We're going to take another look because the central question is, what do we do with the pre-existing facilities that come under the exempt requirements? They weren't bound by that when they opened up.
Correct.
So,
And as others have said, most of them are gaming, although there is the possibility that a school or a church chose to move in after they were open as well. So thank you.
Aisha Goins with Black Joy Consulting, representing CEIC. I actually just want to draw attention to 5065. It talks about hardship and fees. I want to just comment again, with what Ms. Connor suggested as it relates to having hardships for those social equity applicants to be able to pay unforeseen fees. I think in this language, it only is for persons that have independent licenses. I think it should also be for social equity licenses. And then we could, if there's a possibility to be able to do hardships for all fees and not just licensing fees. That's my suggestion.
Good afternoon. My name is Serena Troy with NLS, and I'm here just to make a comment. When we talk about square footage, they're looking at for local jurisdictions. In some cases, they're looking door to door. In some cases, they look parcel to parcel for that distance separation. So it all depends where you're at. I do represent gaming, so they talk about the footprint. When they had the regulation and they started to talk about the 2,500 square foot retail square footage, it had to be within the footprint that they had. So it was the existing footprint. There was a bar, I believe, out in a very rural area, couldn't meet 2,500 square feet. So they were not allowed to go for gaming. So that is what the rules are according to gaming and then what local jurisdiction. So I hope that clarifies some of your questions. Thank you.
Any other comments? Steve, is there any other comments up in Carson City?
No, there's not.
Right. We'll move on to the consumption lounge regs themselves. Right, Regulation 1. Again, I'm just going to go over some of the brief changes, and then we'll open it up to comment when I go through all of them. NCCR 1.222 added tinctures, transdermal patches, and adds a warning to these items. We will also be adding a small section that allows for the apportionment of bulk items to be sold as single serve items. In Regulation 4, there was no real update to this reg. Regulation 5, NCCR 5.100 was an update to the issuance and renewal of licenses to make it a little clearer. Regulation 6 was, again, mostly housekeeping changes. However, NCCR 6.072 added 2 additional training topics. Regulation 7, 7.055 removed the language to allow sales facilities to transport product to a lounge. Regulation 9, again, was mostly housekeeping in nature to add in lounges where necessary. Big part of, I guess there are several comments about Reg 9. We brought this in because we're allowing lounges to basically break down bulk orders to give single serving to customers. So where they're doing that, they're responsible for complying with Reg 9. And again, I want Chief Cronkite to go over this in a little more detail to make sure everybody understands, because some people, I guess, made it seem like these lighting regs and other regs were where the consumers were. Generally, that will not be the case, right? Unless for some reason you have like a cooking facility out in the middle of the air. But go ahead, Chief Cronkite.
Right, Kara Cronkite, Chief of Inspection and Audit for the record. Yeah, these lighting and ventilation requirements are pulled from the health code. This only applies to areas where products are being handled. So if you're doing that in your dining area for some reason, like a hibachi grill comes to mind, then this would apply. Same with ventilation. If there's a reason that your operation would result in grease buildup in your dining area, then this ventilation requirement would apply. But otherwise, it would be just in your cooking area or your food handling area. Serving a plate is not considered food handling.
Again, hopefully that alleviates everybody's concerns on Reg 9. There's no significant changes to Reg 10, 11, or 12. Reg 13 included language that required a distributor license for a retail dispensary to transfer products to an independent lounge. And again, may require a distributor license when transferring product to its own retail lounge. Reg 15, Reg 15.010, and we have it in there, we changed it, so you must cease sales for 30 minutes prior to closing if the lounge closes. 15.015 included language to further stress that is required to visually inspect and authenticate all IDs. 15.025, again, adds tinctures and patches and updates the THC limits. 15.030 added the requirement of a COA from a cannabis independent testing laboratory for hemp products sold at the lounges. 15.035 added storage requirements. 15.040, again, was mostly housekeeping and added that communicable illnesses need to be reported pursuant to NCCR 6.090 and NRS 441A. 15.050 includes training on the proper use of PPE. 15.055 added reporting requirements for deviations to mitigation plan or malfunction of equipment. We also changed that odor mitigation has been removed from potential outdoor smoking areas and leaves those requirements up to local jurisdictions. 15.060 added nicotine as clarifying language. 15.065 added tobacco wraps, but again, after further discussion, we will probably be changing tobacco wraps to hemp wraps to avoid tobacco issues within the lounges. 15.075 updated on how to handle retail lounges where a consumer purchased products from the dispensary. Again, they went and made a big purchase, what they have to do with the product while they're in the lounge. 15.080, which is housekeeping. 15.100 updated the transferability of a retail consumption lounge. Requires the creation of a plan to transfer product from a dispensary to a retail lounge, and includes adjacent and a definition of adjacent. 15.105 update to include that ready to consume products must be individually dosed to ensure accuracy and homogeneity. I can't pronounce it. I blame that on Tyler. Infusion of bulk ingredients for multiple servings is prohibited. Also, the prevention of sharing of products, though we may update that language based on a lot of the comments. 15.110 added additional cleanliness requirements on utensils. Does any member of the board have any questions as to these regulation changes?
Not till we hear the industry.
Okay, now we'll open to public comments.
Before this, I just want to add, as Tyler Clements for the record, that on the tobacco wrap discussion, we did receive comment from the Nevada Tobacco Prevention Coalition. So just wanted to acknowledge that and appreciated their outreach as part of this process. And hopefully we came to a good meeting here.
Chris Anderson, Solid Consulting on behalf of Planet 13 Holdings and Hardeen. I submitted a comment on Regulation 1.222, the single-use cannabis product definition. The way that that section is written now, in real-world terms, that eliminates vaporizer products, which, as I spoke to last time, the Public Health Subcommittee, CAC, did have a preference for those products because of their reduced secondhand smoke. And I think I may have given you a little bit of an incomplete estimate as to how much THC the smallest vaporizer products have. And once I had a little more time to calculate what that minimum THC would be in the smallest kind of single serving disposable vaporizer device, and it's almost 250 milligrams. However, not all of that 250 milligrams is actually available in those devices. They, as someone from, I believe, New Leaf pointed out at the last workshop, they stop working once the oil gets down to maybe 0.1 gram. So not all, so you're really talking about a little bit smaller total THC. And the consumer is likely to kind of know where they're at because vaporizer products and inhalable products in general take effect much more quickly than, say, an edible product. Additionally, I submitted a comment requesting that that the board increase the amount of usable cannabis from 1 gram to 3.5 grams if the product or flower to be served and prepared for the consumer is accompanied by a warning that it is not recommended for inexperienced users. The board was attempting to include some of the tobacco wrapped blunt products or otherwise wrapped blunt products, which are preferred by some folks of diverse backgrounds, particularly, but others as well. And those contain more flour than 1 gram. They're a little bit larger. It is important to note that 3.5 grams of flour, if you compare it to vaporizer products, we're talking about maybe 125 milligrams of THC in the largest, even in 3.5 grams. You take 3.5 grams times a maximum of about 30% THC, and that would be really, really high. You're looking at about 125. So I think those are appropriate, and they are single serving in the market today, again, for experienced users. Moving on to section 15.025. I submitted some conforming changes with the suggestions for regulation 1.222. I'll just call out one addition. In subsection 4 of 15.025, I added an exemption for tobacco leaves to conform with the other change that the board included in this draft with reference to tobacco leaves only for wrap usage. Moving on to section 15.105, I saw that a number of folks submitted comments on this piece. Subsection 4E, the board changed the language in that section a little bit, and I think it would be really helpful for operators to change that back to shall not encourage sharing of ready-to-consume cannabis products. We just want to make sure that operators and licensees are held to an achievable standard. We'll be careful, we'll watch it, but we can't be, over our customer's shoulder every second. So, not that we're advocating for allowing, ready-to-consume products to be passed around like Mardi Gras beads, but just making it a little less punitive language. Thank you very much.
I will say on that language, I think we put it in there. We're thinking about updating it as well, but it's in there, and Chief Cronkite spoke about it, is that when people specifically ask, well, we want to split this, or we want to do this, or we want to share this, and this straightforward allows you to just say, no, we can't.
Right. And that's,
if you just put encourage, then you could. That was the point of it.
Okay, yeah. I would encourage the board to use either in enforcement or in the language or both to maybe just consider some kind of clarification that there won't be punitive measures if we're not allowing folks to, or we're not encouraging or promoting sharing, but someone happens to take a piece of someone else's like little slice of infused cake or something. And then just one more comment on vaporizer products and the fairly rare larger flower products. Those are, in my opinion and in the opinion of my clients, pretty crucial to the commercial success of the industry. Those are premium products that today folks pay a lot more for in dispensary settings, and they are single serving as they're sold in dispensaries. And so just for allowing for flexibility for the lounges to be successful from a financial standpoint. I know there were a lot of questions about that at the county workshop. Those would be two really, really important changes. So thank you for considering.
Thanks. And Chief Cronkite, I know I really don't mean to put you on the spot on this one, but I am. But the 1.222, didn't we update it last time so vaporizer products would be included?
Chief Cronkite for the record. Yes, we did. We have a limit though on, I believe it's 100 milligrams THC for those products. And I believe what is being asked for is to increase that to 250 milligrams for those vaporized products, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that's correct. And the way that I got to that number was the smallest commercially available vaporizer device, 0.3 grams times 80% THC, which is not even the highest concentration, but kind of an average maybe. If you go lower than that, you're really, in essence, banning vaporizing products.
Anyone else?
Can I ask for clarification from our own staff, maybe Kara, on this 3.5 grams? This is Tyler Klimas for the record. Nothing prevents a combined sale, which we allow for, and then the facility wrapping 3.5 grams into a single serving or blunt or whatever we want to call it. Is that right?
I'm Chief Cronkite for the record. That's correct. We just are looking into revising 1.222 so that the consumption lounges can receive bulk product and repackage it on site. That's being clarified, and that would allow them to wrap the products on site.
So what it sounds like is you're still going to be able to have those products. I think what we would be trying to prevent here is a single individual going up to buy a single 3.5 gram blunt, which is it's a lot of flour for one person, Chris. I think you can understand that, but I think it still allows for what you guys are trying to accomplish, or at least what some of the facilities are trying to accomplish as part of the sales.
Outside of the vaporizer.
Outside of the vaporizer, correct. It's on the flour.
Right. Understand that's a big change on the flower side, but again, I would call your attention to the intoxicant contents of that. You know, if you compare it to the smallest, vaporizer, we're looking at, about half the amount of THC, even though it's a large product, volume wise. And I'm sorry, Chris Anderson again for the record. It's a large product volume wise, but that actually kind of helps prevent overconsumption in a sense, because those products can't be smoked in just 2 minutes. These are large products at a lower concentration than like a dab or wax or vaporizer, and so it's a little bit of a slow burn, pun intended.
As the vapor products, do you have language for consideration that you have proposed?
Yes, I've submitted proposed changes.
Correct. Know that this process is going to evolve, and we're going to learn a lot of things when we come out with these regulations, and what consumers want, and how this industry and how this section of the industry is successful. But we're going to take this approach. We've got to protect public health and public safety as part of these. And so I just want to make that clear. That's what our approach has to be and will be for the start. But it is why we have proposed, some of the things that we've proposed here. But I do appreciate the comments and certainly understand.
Thank you for those comments.
Can I jump in with a question?
Of course.
So what is the reason for the limit on the vaporizers?
What is the?
I don't think there was any specific limit on vaporizers. We just put a 1 gram limit, trying to control the consumers to discuss their usage, their ability to use with the salespeople is what we were trying to do. We tried to update vaporizers last time, but it doesn't sound like we included quite enough to include vaporizers. But again, vaporizers weren't specifically being excluded. It's just how it worked out.
So could they just be exempted from that 1 gram, or a different amount allowed for those? Or is there a reason not to?
I think, yeah, we are going to probably play with the language next one to try to include vaporizers, and probably put it under that warning again for not recommended for inexperienced users. But we need to look at his language a little closer and make sure it's appropriate.
Thanks.
Get myself off the hot seat here.
You like being up there.
Hi there, Brianna Padilla for the record. I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that in regard to the vaporizing products, there are actually devices that help with single serve dosing. So you essentially are sipping on a cup of vapor, which would allow for public safety to be considered. So perhaps we could send your staff some information on those devices and that can be worked in.
Yes, please do.
Good morning, Amanda Connor for the record. I have a comment on 1.222 as well, but it has nothing to do with serving size limitations. It's simply a suggestion that right now single-use cannabis products are limited and it states they must be prepared at a licensed cannabis production facility. However, single use is also defined to include usable cannabis or flower, as we've been talking about. So I think it should also be permitted to come from cultivators because it doesn't make sense that the cultivators would have to transfer it to the production facility to prepare the single-use flower to then send to the retail store to then send to the lounge. That's that comment. So I'd suggest limiting it to production facilities or cultivation.
And just, you know, again, we're opening up, we're going to open up 1.22 a little more so you don't have to have a lot of single use prepackaged things being transferred. We want the facilities to be able to open up more bulk and handle it themselves when they break it down.
Great. I think that leads me right to 9.050, which is what I think was added so they could break down the bulk regarding sinks and lighting and some other things. My question is simply this seems to apply to all establishments now instead of just the proposal is to remove it from limiting to production facilities. What if there is a cultivation that doesn't have all of the sink requirements because previously they weren't required to? Cultivations do bulk package. Are they going to now be required to add sinks if this regulation is adopted?
I'm going to leave that completely to Chief Cronkite.
I'm Chief Cronkite for the record. We have been observing cultivators' operations and requesting that they install a 3-compartment sink based on their operations. So there are several that have them currently. However, yes, we would be requiring that if they're handling cannabis and their operation requires washing of equipment, wash, rinse, and sanitize of equipment, that they would need to install a 3-compartment sink. However, my staff has been trained to grant some allowance for time on that. We understand that it's not something you can install in a day.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. For 12.050, the required disclosures, I just have really kind of a grammatical change in subsection 2. It talks about the electronic notification system, which I think is a great thing to help reduce waste. But it says approved by the board and the board is not capitalized there. I do think it should be capitalized because it's a defined term. And separately, I just have a comment, and this is me trying to learn, but I think when it says board is taking action throughout these regulations pursuant to open meeting laws, that would mean the board itself has to do so in an open meeting law. I noted elsewhere there's references to board agents and their actions. So I just think we might want to look at these regulations and be clear if, you know, things like approving the electronic notification system is going to require it be noticed and go to an open meeting. The next comment I have, we did go into 15, correct?
Yep.
All right. So 15.0402 A. I just have a clarification question. It talks about that the certified food protection manager must be on site during all hours of operation. What if it's a facility that only has limited food service hours, much like some of the bars that their kitchen is only open for certain hours and then other hours there's no food provided? If food is not provided, is a certified food protection manager still required to be on site?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward that if, as long as the lounge is serving food, you have to have it on site. If it's not serving food, then you wouldn't have to have it on site. You wouldn't have to have them on site.
Okay.
But
I read it.
during those operating hours where they are serving
Serving
food, then yes, they
okay.
would have to have them there.
See, and I read it, if they ever serve food, then the food protection manager must be there during all hours of operation, regardless of food service. So I think that's a clarification. The other one I had was 15.040B. It talks about that if you serve food, that all staff must obtain a food handler card. My clarification there is it all staff that work or handle the food, or is it truly all staff, i.e. if a security guard outside patrolling the perimeter who is not going to be near the food service, but he is a staff member, does he have to obtain the food a handler card? I think that is just clarification. And then last, I would also point out here that I note that in some sections, staff is used, other sections, employees are used, other sections, agents are used. And I was trying to determine if there's a reason for that language and if there's distinguishing factors or if it was just the way they are written. And lastly, in 15.055, no, 15.0601B, it requires a 72-point font sign stating health warning, this is a smoking lounge. Similar to my comment that I made last workshop with regards to warnings being provided to the consumer here for a posted warning. If the lounge does not permit smoking as a part of their operations, I would suggest that this health warning 72-point font sign should not be required to be posted. So I would suggest exemption language, much like what was put in CCR 12.0503. Thank you.
Aisha Goings for the record, Black Joy Consulting on behalf of CEIC. I actually don't have a lot of notes. I just bring my notebook up because I needed to read it. Regulation 13 in regards to 0403, the cannabis sales facility may transport single-use cannabis and cannabis products. My concern is the fees that will incur to the independent and the social equity licenses. They're already having to buy product from retail licensees, and now this is going to be another fee from the distributors that will be on top of this. I don't know. I've read the regulations and I'm not clear on how the board plans to ensure that there aren't any excessive fees or that these prices from retail to retail are manageable, because if they're not, then how will these new licensees be profitable? I didn't see anything in here regarding that, but I'm asking, how do you plan to regulate or monitor excessive taxes and fees from retail to retail?
So I'll add in the bill, AB 341. It's just something absolutely we're going to look at and we're required to look at. I believe at the end of the bill, I don't know what section it is, we are to submit a report, I believe, to the legislature on business practices as regarding these transactions. It's something we monitored closely and we're going to continue to do so.
So will that be done quarterly as they open, or just to legislation? Because I would hate to have these businesses default financially because we weren't monitoring closely, because we only in session every other year, right? So my concern is, are we going to wait till we go to session in 2025 and say we found out that people are being overpriced? Or is the board going to take a look at that quarterly, semi, bi-monthly? I know we're not going to wait for 2 years.
I mean, again, it's something that we've got to look at, and we feel pretty strongly about that. I mean, here's the thing, though. You know, there's a line here. I mean, we don't regulate business practices. However, the bill requires us to keep a look at that and make sure there's some kind of parity in the lounges on those transactions. And if there's changes that need to be made, we certainly will support those being made. I mean, you bring up realistic concerns, absolutely the concerns that we have as well. But I mean, again, we've got to kind of see how this works. And having that knowledge is the first step to make any kind of change. But you bring up absolute concerns that we share with you.
Is it possible to, I wish I was looking at the regulation right now, but is it possible to adopt the same structure that you're using to regulate taxes to look at how prices are being charged from retail to retail?
That authority wasn't given
Mm,
on the private side.
that's okay, Honorable Douglas. I just know what I need to do. I appreciate it.
Understand?
Thank you.
Chris Anderson, Solid Consulting, on behalf of Planet 13 Holdings and Hardeen. For the record, um, I shared the concerns as the drafting of AB 341 was happening. Shared the concerns that Ms. Goins pointed out, and shameless plug since this is part of the discussion. I do believe that I have a client or clients that will be extremely fair with independent, non-retail lounges. So, call me if you need help. In regard to
You heard him,
regulations,
Ms. Goins.
regulation 6.085, I neglected to request a change that I did submit in writing. Subsection 11 about the emergency medical service response. And I've submitted comments, and I believe that the Nevada Cannabis Association, formerly known as the Nevada Dispensary Association, has also submitted comments on this section in the past as well. On the chance that your concern is related to secondhand smoke or the perception of potential for secondhand intoxication, I submitted a revision that would address that concern, changing the second part of that line to the cannabis establishment is responsible for ensuring that all consumption of inhalable cannabis products, if allowed, cease until such personnel have completed their investigation or services. I encourage you to adopt that change, and hopefully that, it would sufficiently protect emergency service response. Thank you.
Hello again, Brendan Bloom with Green Thumb Industries. I have two comments, recommendations. We recommend the board to consider allowing flower products to be at 3.5 grams versus 1 gram. Based on our experience and some of the other people have noted, the volume of flower is in the potency. I understand the overconsumption concern, but having it at less than 3.5 grams and having it to come from a cultivation facility will limit the product availability for the lounges, not just the lounges that have relationships with cultivators, but the independent and social equity lounges. And really, for this program to be successful, the customer, the consumer is going to look for as many product types as possible. So having less than 3.5 grams will greatly limit the product selection at retail. And then also the cultivation facilities would then have to not come up with a new product line, but greatly shift their focus away from what they're currently doing to then fit into the 1 gram limit. So 3.5 grams or giving us the ability at retail to break up a product into 1 gram single servings.
And that is what we're going to be doing. We're going to allow them to break it up.
Okay, cool.
But also understand the way the statutes are set up, they can't buy anything from cultivators. They have to buy everything direct from dispensaries.
And then dispensaries have to buy from cultivators.
Correct.
The other one is somebody mentioned it before, but sharing. We recommend the board allow sharing among patrons. We actually, from our experience in operating lounges, we see this as a way to limit overconsumption because a lot of people in our experience would like to share products and have multiple opportunities to do that. So not allowing that would actually encourage overconsumption in our experience. That's all for me. Thank you.
Chief Cronkite, for the record, I just want to clarify that the sharing is limited to those ready to consume items. So like your infused dishes, it's just very common that they're not homogeneous. That say you order a 5 milligram meal, that 5 milligrams isn't equally spread throughout. Say you make lasagna or something, it's not equally distributed throughout that plate. And so we don't want them to order a shared dish thinking that I'll get half, you get half. The dishes need to be dosed to order. And so the person could order as much or as little as they want at that time. But things like usable cannabis, those single use items, those are not limited for sharing.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Probably last chance. Of course, Scott.
You had to egg them on.
Again, Scott Rutledge for the record. He said last chance. I just wanted to say thank you all for all the hard work, and we appreciate you allowing us to come here and repeat ourselves on things we've already submitted in writing, which I did this morning. I was late to get it printed for today, but we did submit comments on behalf of the chamber. And again, just thank you all very much for your ability to giving us the ability to continue to work on this. I think you guys have done a great job so far. So thanks.
Any comments up in Carson City?
There's no comments in Carson City.
Okay. Director Klimas, I'll turn it back over to you.
Did we go to the board? Was there any questions? We did?
We didn't go back to the board, so.
Well, if there were any questions on these? Comments?
Only comment is we appreciate the comments from the industry and the folks who will be affected. From my standpoint, some of my questions are aimed at trying to keep us out of court, trying to delay this. Because as I look at the trades in the legal industry across the country, every time something goes forward, it seems to take 2 steps back because people are instantly in litigation to block or to get in or to get out or to go around. We hope to, no pun intended, have a good product that serves people of the state, our visitors, as we have this weekend of all these people in it. I know people are hoping that their industry sales hits over the weekend and whatnot, but we're conscious of that and conscious of watching litigation and trying to figure out what we can and can't do. Some of the courts are consistent, some of the courts are inconsistent, and some of the points that you're making, it's the devil's in the details, as you know, and so we appreciate the comments. And as the other comment about the businesses, based upon the fairness of gas prices and housing and food these days, who knows what's going to happen.
I would also like to say to everyone that's attending here today is that it's important that you attend. The community is important to this process, and the more that we can hear your voices, the better product that we can actually turn out for you when we actually issue a license. So thank you again for attending and always being involved.
Great. Well, if there's no other comments, we'll move on to agenda item number 4. This is general public comment. So more public comment. We'll start in Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to provide public comment?
I see no public comment in Carson City.
Okay, is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to provide any last thoughts, questions, comments? Okay, well, it's a good discussion today. A projected or potential timeline here is that we make a couple more tweaks. You could see these next on the June board meeting for adoption. So again, echoing all the thoughts already. Thank you for your participation. You guys have a great weekend.
If you want to do general public comment? No?
That was it.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, cool.